Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue bringing you a new video. This time, CEO Heartfelt and Hung surprised Tieu San by organizing a birthday celebration for her. After a long stretch of tension that seemed to have no end in sight, Hung finally managed to bring his mother home safely. The road from the hospital back to the old house wasn't long, but to him, it was the heaviest journey he had taken in all these years. Every step seemed to drag along layers of memories, times of running away, sleepless nights, the worried looks of loved ones, and the quiet fears he had never spoken aloud. But this time, when the door closed, it closed in true peace. There were no frantic knocks anymore, no threats hanging over their heads, no lingering sense of unease that tightened the chest whenever night fell. The debt that had dragged on for so many years was finally settled once and for all. The notes and papers that had kept the family living in constant anxiety were taken out and torn up without hesitation. The dry sound of ripping paper echoed through the room, but to Hung, it was the most relieving sound he had ever heard. The threats that had haunted them for so long faded with it, like the final closing of an old, creaking door. Hung's mother sat quietly, her hands trembling as they rested on her lap, her gaze lowered for a long time. For the first time, she truly understood the cost of past mistakes, how her weakness and thoughtless choices had forced her children to bear far more than they ever should have. Hung did not reproach her, nor did he dwell on the past. He spoke very little. After everything, he said only one thing, in a low, steady voice, as if he wanted every word to sink deep into her heart: live peacefully, and never let your children have to carry this burden again. There were no long promises, no loud declarations, just a short sentence, but it was enough to make his mother break down in tears, enough to leave the entire house in silence for a long while afterward. It felt as though the family had finally passed the greatest ordeal of their lives. The days that followed moved slowly, more calmly. Yet somewhere beneath the surface, there were quieter, deeper things being prepared, like gentle breaths taken before a special moment arrives. After Hung's mother returned home, the small house gradually regained its familiar warmth. Mornings carried the scent of freshly cooked rice, afternoons were filled with soft conversations, and in the evenings, the yellow glow from the windows made the space feel gentler. Heartfelt was the one who stayed closest, caring for her day after day. From simple meals to timely medicine, to making sure she slept well each night, she paid attention to every small detail. Sometimes, it was just sitting by the bed, listening to old stories, seemingly insignificant things that slowly bridged the distance between them through sincerity and patience. Tieu San also often brought her child back to visit his grandmother. These visits needed no notice, just stopping by to share a meal, exchange a few words, and let the child run around the yard, laughter ringing clear and bright. The family atmosphere became fuller because of it, no longer as empty as before. Everything happened naturally, no one tried to prove anything, yet everyone could feel the bond quietly returning. No one said it out loud, but CEO Hai observed everything closely. He noticed every small change in the house, every glance, every moment Tieu San stood silently by the stove or bent down to straighten her child's clothes. He saw the exhaustion still lingering after all the upheaval, but he also saw her quiet strength, the familiar habit of sacrifice so ingrained that she often forgot to think of herself. One afternoon, when things had finally settled a bit, Hai took the initiative to call Hung. The call was brief, without the usual pleasantries. There was no talk of work, no business matters. On the other end of the line, Hai's voice was low and measured, as though he had thought carefully before speaking. He asked softly, almost afraid of breaking the rare calm. "Brother Hung, Tieu San's birthday is coming up soon, isn't it?" Hung paused. Of course he knew. But amid all the worries and pressures of recent times, he hadn't once thought about organizing or preparing anything. To him, Tieu San had always been quiet, never fond of attention, always putting others before herself. Her birthday seemed to pass like any other day. On the other end of the line, Hai continued, his voice still steady and unhurried. I know she would never think of herself. But this time, please let me do that for her. Hung remained silent for a long moment. That silence wasn't hesitation, it was understanding. He understood the unspoken care behind those words, and he understood that after everything Tieu San had endured, she truly deserved a moment to be thought of, to be loved in the fullest way. At last, Hung gave a slight nod, a quiet agreement that opened the door to something waiting just ahead. There was no need for loud discussions, no family meeting, no long exchanges of opinions. Hung said only one sentence, in a low, firm voice, as if he had thought it through carefully long before. If we're going to do it, we'll do it at home. So Mom can be happy. So Tieu San can feel that she still has a complete family behind her. That brief sentence settled everything. No one objected. No one asked anything further. Because everyone understood that after all the upheavals they had been through, what Tieu San needed was not a crowded party or noisy congratulations, but the feeling of being among family, seeing familiar faces, knowing that behind her there was still a place she could return to. And so, everything was prepared quietly. There was no written plan, no clear division of tasks. Each person simply knew what to do, silently arranging things in their own way. The small house began to change in subtle ways, so slight that one might miss them without close attention. Corners were cleaned more thoroughly than usual, dishes that hadn't been used in a long time were carefully washed again, and the old tablecloth was replaced with a simple but neater one. Everything happened slowly and discreetly, as if everyone was afraid of disturbing the fragile peace that had only just returned. Heartfelt was the first to sense that something was different. She didn't notice it through any obvious detail, but through a series of small changes. The house was cleaned more meticulously than usual, not just tidy, but deliberately cared for. Hung's mother was reminded to rest earlier, urged to eat on time, and told not to do any heavy work. Hung, meanwhile, was often in and out on phone calls, sometimes standing outside in the yard for a long while, sometimes stepping quietly into a corner of the kitchen to answer. Yet whenever Tieu San appeared, he would hastily put his phone away, avoiding her gaze in an awkward, almost clumsy manner. Heartfelt noticed all of it. She sensed that something was going on, but she didn't ask. Not because she wasn't curious, but because she understood that some things, when kept in silence, are more complete. She simply did her part quietly, helping when needed, reminding others of small details, then stepped back, allowing everything to unfold at its own pace. That evening, Tieu San brought her child to Hung's mother's house as usual. The familiar road, the familiar gate, the yellow light spilling out from inside, all exactly as they had been so many times before. She suspected nothing. In her mind, it was just another simple family meal, like the many dinners they had shared since Hung's mother returned home. She walked in gently, holding her child's hand, her thoughts still lingering on her child's upcoming birthday. At that moment, Tieu San's mind was filled only with small, practical concerns. A tiny birthday cake she was saving up to buy for her child. A few simple toys her child liked, prices she had checked days ago. She calculated every expense, every saved coin, hoping that on her child's birthday, that small smile would be complete. As for her own birthday, she had almost forgotten it, or rather, she had never considered it important. The door opened. The lights turned on. Suddenly, the house filled with applause and laughter, not too loud, but enough to completely change the atmosphere. Surprise! Tieu San froze at the doorway. Her hand tightened slightly, her eyes widening in stunned disbelief. Before her was a warmly decorated room, nothing extravagant, nothing flashy, yet every detail carried a deep sense of familiarity. Soft strings of lights were neatly arranged, their gentle glow spreading throughout the space. The dining table was already set, not with lavish dishes, but with familiar foods, suited to each person's taste, exactly like the family meals she had always known. In the center of the room, 2 cakes were placed side by side. One smaller, simply decorated, for her child. And the other, for her. There was no long message written on it, just a modest cake, placed carefully, as if someone had taken great care to set it right there. In that moment, Tieu San couldn't say a word. All the thoughts in her mind seemed to stop. Her throat tightened, her heart began to beat faster, and her eyes stung slightly with tears. She stood still, not because she didn't understand what was happening, but because she couldn't quite believe that she was the one being thought of in this way. In that warm space, among familiar faces, Tieu San suddenly felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, confused, deeply moved, and as if she were being gently wrapped in something she had once thought she'd forgotten. Hung's mother stepped forward, slowly, as if afraid of shattering the moment unfolding before them. Her thin but warm hand reached out to take Tieu San's, squeezing gently, trembling slightly, as though she had gathered all her courage just to speak. The way she looked at Tieu San was no longer filled with hesitation or guilt, but with a clear, genuine affection, the kind that comes from a mother who has endured enough loss to truly understand the value of what remains. You've spent so many years taking care of everyone else. Today, let the family take care of you. As those words fell, Tieu San felt her heart tighten. She lowered her head deeply, as if to hide the rush of emotion rising too quickly within her. The hand holding hers made her realize that this wasn't just a birthday celebration, it was a quiet acknowledgement that she had truly become part of this family, not out of duty or circumstance, but through sincere connection. Heartfelt stepped forward next, without saying a word. She simply wrapped her arms around Tieu San, holding her just tightly enough, just long enough. No comfort was spoken, no explanations offered, only an embrace carrying the understanding of a woman who had witnessed too much silent sacrifice. In that embrace, Tieu San felt something simple yet profoundly important: she was not alone. Someone was here, standing beside her, understanding her, and ready to walk forward with her. Hung stood behind them, slightly awkward as always. He wasn't used to moments that required words for emotions. For him, care had always been shown through actions rather than speech. But this time, he stepped forward and placed his hand on his sister's shoulder. It was firm and familiar, carrying the protective strength of an older brother who had shouldered too many responsibilities in life. Happy birthday. You've been through a lot. Just that one short sentence, nothing more. Yet Tieu San suddenly felt a sting at the bridge of her nose. She turned away slightly, afraid that if she lingered even a moment longer, her emotions would spill over. In that instant, she realized that the years she had endured in silence, the things she had never spoken aloud, had finally been seen and acknowledged, in the simplest way possible. The room gradually grew quiet. No one spoke. The silence settled naturally, as if everyone was waiting for what would come next. The soft yellow light cast a warm glow over everything, slowing time and deepening the sense of calm. CEO Hai stepped forward. No fanfare. No grand gestures. Nothing to draw attention. He simply walked toward the table, composed and steady, his eyes never leaving Tieu San. His calm presence seemed to slow the room by another beat. Hai placed 2 small, neatly wrapped boxes on the table, simple, square, without bright colors or elaborate bows. Everything was understated, just as he always preferred. He looked up at Tieu San, his voice low and clear, not loud, but strong enough for everyone in the room to hear. I don't want to give gifts to impress anyone. I just want Tieu San to know that there is someone who truly values her. There were no long promises, no flowery words. Just that single sentence, spoken slowly, deliberately, as if each word had been carefully weighed beforehand. Tieu San stood still, her heart beating faster, her eyes fixed on the two boxes before her. Hai opened the first box. Inside was a ring, simple and refined, without ornate details or flashy gemstones. Yet at a glance, it was clear how carefully it had been chosen. Every line was balanced and precise, carrying a quiet beauty that didn't need to announce its worth. The ring rested silently in its box, but it conveyed something unmistakable: seriousness, respect, and an intention that was anything but casual. Hai said nothing as he closed the first box. He then opened the second. A delicate, elegant bracelet appeared under the light. It wasn't eye-catching, nor did it demand admiration at first glance. But the longer one looked, the more the thoughtfulness behind every small detail became apparent. It was refined enough to make the wearer feel cherished, not because of material value, but because of careful attention and deep understanding. It didn't impose or bind, it simply existed, quietly present, like a steady reassurance. The room remained silent. No one spoke, no one broke the moment. Tieu San stood before the two gifts, surrounded by familiar faces, in an evening she had never imagined for herself. The emotions within her rose slowly and fully, like a warm tide spreading through her chest, forcing her to take a deep breath just to steady herself. The entire room fell silent for a few seconds, a very special kind of silence, never awkward, but rich with emotion. It felt as though everyone needed a brief pause to fully absorb what had just happened, to let those simple yet deeply heartfelt words sink into their hearts. Hoica let out a soft breath, as if finally releasing something she had carried inside for a very long time. Her gaze toward Tieu San softened, filled with the quiet empathy of a woman who understood what it meant to sacrifice in silence, to grow used to placing herself last without ever complaining. Hung's mother raised a hand to cover her mouth, her eyes glistening. She didn't say a word, but that look held so much: affection, gratitude, and a rare sense of reassurance she hadn't felt so clearly in a long time. Even Hung had to turn away slightly. He tilted his head, pretending to look elsewhere, as if observing something beyond the window. But the subtle tension in his shoulders revealed everything. The emotions rising inside him were too strong to show openly. For Hung, the past years had been an unending stretch of carrying burdens. And in this moment, seeing his sister placed at the center of love and care, he felt a weight lift from his chest. Hai remained where he was, calm and composed. He didn't add grand words, didn't paint distant futures, and didn't rely on flowery language to heighten the moment. He spoke just one sentence, but every word was clear and steady, like a statement that needed no repetition. I don't want Tieu San to be remembered only as a mother. I want her to be cherished as a woman who deserves to be loved. The words echoed softly through the quiet room, not loud, but powerful enough to reach everyone. They weren't just meant for Tieu San, they spoke for all the things she had never dared to ask for, never dared to hope for herself. For years, she had been known as a devoted mother, a strong woman, a pillar for others. Rarely had anyone stood before her and said so clearly that she deserved love, not out of obligation, not because of circumstances, but simply for who she was. Tieu San broke down in tears. Not loud sobs, not tears of fleeting weakness. These were silent tears, falling slowly and deeply, from someone who had carried too much for too long. Tears of years spent telling herself she had to be strong, had to endure, had to put others before herself. Tears of a moment when she suddenly realized that being placed at the center, being cared for and truly seen, could feel both warm and fragile at the same time. She raised a hand to cover her face, her shoulders trembling slightly. Emotions long suppressed finally found an outlet, quietly, but irresistibly. And just then, her child ran over, small arms wrapping tightly around her. That clumsy yet sincere embrace made Tieu San bend down, pulling her child into her arms, tears soaking into the child's hair. In that embrace, everything felt more complete, more whole. The house filled with laughter mixed with tears. The atmosphere was no longer heavy, and no further explanations were needed. No one said anything more, yet everyone understood clearly, this moment was not just a birthday celebration. It was a recompense for the years Tieu San had quietly sacrificed. It was a gentle yet powerful affirmation that after all the losses, hardships, and unspoken struggles, Tieu San still had family by her side, still had abundant love, and had a man who stood beside her with sense. Respect. The episode closed with the image of the whole family gathered around the dining table. Warm lights filled the space, familiar dishes were laid out, and small stories were shared in gentle voices. Laughter rang out, soft, not loud, but enough to fill the house. And in each heart was a very real sense of reassurance, a peace that came from knowing everything was slowly finding its way back to the rhythm of love. At last, the one who had long stood behind, who had quietly carried and sacrificed, was able to step forward, under the gentle gaze of everyone who remained. Stay tuned for the next episode to see what happens next.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình nhé. Hôm nay thì mình đang làm video live. Làm video live cho này trước. Tạm biệt mọi người nhé. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong video tiếp theo.